Hey everybody, it's Emily Korish here, your friendly neighborhood adventure racer. I have another question and response video in preparation for the Off-Road Rage 12-hour adventure race in Warsaw, Missouri. We're only a couple weeks away from the race, so I'm getting really excited. Can't wait to meet all of you. So this question comes from Kimberly Rogers Huff. She wanted to know, how do you navigate / pace when you're canoeing? And I'm just gonna assume that means like pace, that means pace count. Like, how can you tell how much distance you've traveled? So the answer to that question is that it depends. It always depends. So there's kind of two main types of paddling that you will be doing in an adventure race. One is on a river, and the other one is on a lake. And kind of your navigation style will be a little bit different depending on if you're on a river or the lake. Just heads up, last year at the Off-Road Rage, we were on more or less a lake. It was a reservoir, so it was a lake. So anyway, I'll just touch on a river briefly, and then we'll talk about lakes. When you're navigating on a river, you really navigate based on what the river is doing. So you'll be wanting to pay attention, your navigator wants to pay attention to, is the river going straight south? Is it going southwest? Is it going north? Like, what way is the river going? And then are there sharp bends? Are there long straightaways? Is there a gradual bend? Like, you're just going to be following what that river does. Hopefully you're paddling downstream, which is easier, but you might be paddling upstream, and both of them apply. So you pay attention constantly to what the river is doing. Make sure you have your map out, make sure you have your compass out, and you're going to be watching what the river does. And based on what the river is doing, how it's arranged in the world, in the terrain, that's how you know where you are on that river. So just a quick example, this is from the Castlewood 8-hour race in December, a race I direct, so I have all the maps to it. So just as an example, so up here, this is TA1 where the racers put in. This is the Merrimack River along here. Some of it's purple because there's some gravel mining on it, so it turns purple, but then it kind of snakes along here, heads southish, has a nice sharp bend, and then it comes around and finally bends up north again up to TA2 where they took out. So that's just that section of river. So it's a lot of features available to tell where you are. You know, obviously if you're paddling downstream and you're headed north, you're going to be on one, probably this section of the river here. If you're paddling downstream and you're doing like a lot of curlicues, you're probably going to, or S-bends, you're on this section here. So let's say you wanted to head to this checkpoint. This is like a stream river junction right there. So if I was navigating this section, we'd put in, I'd look at the map and understand, okay, we're gonna head generally southeast for a ways, and then we're gonna take a bend almost due east, and then we're gradually gonna be starting to head northeast, and that's when I need to really pay attention to find this little creek on River Right. So really this whole first section, I'm not gonna be paying attention to my map a ton. I'm just gonna be more paying attention to what the river's doing, making sure I can pick the fastest lines, where the fast water is on the outside of the bends, avoid any deadfall that's submerged in the river. Like, there's lots to do on a river paddle even when you're not navigating. So that's gonna be my main focus for this first section of the paddle. Then I'm gonna be like, oh, okay, I've got a lot of close contour lines here. There's a lot of big bluffs. I'm gonna look for those. Sorry, this table just shifted. And then as I start gradually heading north, I'm gonna start looking river right for this creek junction here. And looks like the bluff line is gonna kind of taper out a little and get nice and low, and then I'll find that creek. And then once I find the creek, I know I'm just gonna keep heading north and switch around here. I really don't need to worry too much because it looks like the TA is right on the river. It's gonna be on my left-hand side. Looks like there's a road right next to the river there, and probably there's gonna be like a TA tent and flags and volunteers, and so probably gonna see it. So that's how I would approach navigating on the paddle, on a river paddle. And pace counting, it's not really so specific as a pace count, but more like you're just checking off all of these features as you go along to understand where you are on the water. So yeah, it's not like you're really, although I have done it in the past where I've counted paddle strokes. I've timed a boat from like 2 known points to understand what her speed is. Like those are useful things, but in general, if a river has a lot of features like this, you're just gonna navigate off of the features. If you're on a long straightaway, maybe that timing would be more helpful. So that's rivers. Next is lakes. And I have a side note here. This is a huge map. This is from one of the USARA Nationals. It's like, I can't even fit it on the screen. It's so big. But like, see how it has this missing chunk in it? We actually we did most of the race on this big, huge map. And then at the end, there was just like a small navigation section right here. And we were sick, our navigator David was sick of carrying this huge map. So we just cut out this small section that we needed and just carried that on the last section. So don't be afraid to cut your map up in a race. Like obviously don't cut off any important information, but by no means do you need to carry this full, chunk of heavy paper for the whole time if you don't want to. So anyway, just a side note. So I'm gonna fold this thing down and just talk about this lake paddle. This is actually like a very critical section of the race early. And I mean, I remember this particular paddle because it was super windy. We had a huge headwind and we had this long lake to paddle down. So, all right. Apologize for my map folding speed here. Okay, so we had to put in up here. It's actually behind the fold. So let's just say like we put in up here, and we had to go all the way down to these 2 far points as checkpoints, and then come back up to the top of the lake. And just like full disclosure, we actually didn't end up paddling down here because we thought it was too far, and we didn't think we could clear the course, so we never actually went here. But I'm still going to talk about the navigation because it's a great example. So how you would navigate on a river or on a lake is like kind of similar to a river in that you want to really check off the features that you're seeing and kind of make a plan in your head of what you expect to see and then check those things off as you pass them. But you're not going to have necessarily all of those bends and turns that a river would have just because the lake is larger. It's a bigger body of water. It's maybe a little bit harder to navigate off of potentially. So obviously a bearing is going to be really useful here. Not even necessarily one that you like dial up on your compass and like shoot a bearing, but just in general, like, okay, so we put in up here. In general, it looks like we're going to need to go through this narrow point of land right here. So we put in up here. We have to go through this narrow part of the lake where there's a bridge. We have to go through that narrow part, and then it's going to widen up and split into 2 forks, and we have to go to like the far end of each fork. So that's how I would navigate this section is like, okay, in general, I'm going to put it up here. I need to go generally southeast, and then I'm going to hit this bridge, and this is going to be an important marker for me. So like, okay, maybe I, take a quick measurement here and understand how long that took me. And I'm like, oh, I have to make, that plus that, and back. So like almost 4 times the distance as it takes for me to go here is what I need to complete this loop down here. So that would be a good kind of speed pace estimate for me if I was paddling this in a race to understand if I had enough time. So once you cross this bridge here, then you're going to start looking for kind of this gradual bend. You're going to look for each of these inlets, past those. You don't need anything in there. They're just good checkoff features. And then you're going to kind of look for this peninsula here and understand like, okay, this is my split where I need to go right or left to get each of these checkpoints. And so once I hit this split here, let's say I'm going to go to number 8, which is over this way. Okay, I'm going to hit this split, gradually angle to the east, see this other peninsula here, wrap around it, and then head straight into 8, which looks like it's kind of on the shore, just kind of generically on the shore. There's a little point there that might help me aim off and get to number 8. And then I gotta turn around, get back to this point again, and then kind of do a similar exercise to get over here to 9. So I'm gonna wrap myself around this point here, head southwest for a little bit. Looks like about 1.5 km, and then I'm gonna wrap around this inlet and follow the shore in to the very end of the inlet to get number 9 there. And then I gotta turn around and go all the way back to the takeout. So it's a little bit different, if that makes sense, on a lake. You have more water to work with. You need to maybe pay more attention to what the land is doing around you when you're paddling on a lake versus on the river. You kind of paid more attention to what the water's doing. But really it's all important. Like, that's what's so challenging about navigation, is you just really need to be taking in the maximum amount of detail about your surroundings as you possibly can, and then translate that 3D maximum detail world, translate that into 2D from the map to understand where you are. So just a little bit about pacing. I kind of mentioned that. It helps maybe early in the paddle to pick out 2 very well-known features that you can kind of get close on the distance between. Time yourself, give your team a split, and then maybe use that throughout the race as like, okay, this should be our expected paddle speed. I have used counting paddle strokes as like a pace count, but it's generally not super helpful. I don't even know like what to say about how far a paddle stroke goes, but maybe like 1 or 2 meters. And it's more like useful for just like keeping your team motivated. Like, okay, stroke, 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 stroke. Like, that's gonna be more useful to keep yourself motivated than necessarily measuring the distance per stroke. So that's all I have to say about navigating on the paddle. Obviously, all of these things that I talked about are pretty much pretty straightforward during the day, but at night it's like a whole different ballgame. But we can dive into that later, because the Off-Road Rage Adventure Race is a 12-hour, and really hope we're not going to be paddling after dark. If we are, it probably means something went wrong. So anyway, I'll see you guys in a couple weeks at the Off-Road Rage 12-hour in Warsaw, Missouri. And again, if you have any other questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll respond as soon as possible. Thanks guys, see you later.